Okay, good morning, members, officers, and you're very welcome, and members of the public that may be listening. You're very welcome to this morning's meeting of the full Licensing Committee, Thursday, the 8th of December, 2022. I will first pass to my clerk, please, and if she'd advise us with regard to housekeeping. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if a fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Brady Road under the flyover. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I would ask, please, for apologies.
Chairman, we've received from Councillors Norman Decent, Mark Howell, David Brown and Kieran Wilson. And we have Councillor Anne Filer as a substitute for Councillor Decent.
Thank you very much. Has anybody heard from Councillor Farr?
Yes, only
Oh boy, no problem. He can join us when he gets here. Okay, thank you very much for this. So we have an item of urgent business under 2A, and I will explain as to this. And it's with regard to the election of a vice chairman for this committee for the remaining municipal year. And it's following the receipt of written notice to the Chief Executive from Councillor David Kelsey, our present vice chair, to resign from the office of vice chair as of today. And I have requested that an item of urgent business be added to the agenda in accordance with the Constitution. And the committee requested to elect a vice chair of the Licensing Committee for the remainder of the 2022-23 municipal year. I'm also tasked to give a reason as to why I deem this to be an urgent item. And I also have Mr. Jones on the line. And he will be able to explain further once I have given that reason as required under the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Jones. The Licensing Committee needs a vice chair in place at all times for the purposes of effecting licensing subcommittees. The chairs of the subcommittees, as agreed by the committee, are to be either the chair of licensing, the vice chair of licensing, or an experienced licensing member. We hold 2 weekly scheduled statute-required subcommittee meetings and often more if TENS or emergency taxi hearings or other is required. We often have to be available at very short notice when members scheduled to attend these meetings are unavailable. It's understandable, for our licensing committee members are all very busy with their council calendars and other commitments. And this has proven for many members to be a challenge in itself. Thus, it would render the available number of licensing members that fit the criteria to chair subcommittees reduced. From our number, we only have a finite number that fit the criteria of experienced individuals being available to chair these stat-required subcommittee meetings, which risks the democratic process being impaired. There are also those in our number who may prefer not to chair a subcommittee, and that choice must be respected. This issue is further exacerbated currently by the pending Christmas and New Year holidays, where subcom chairs will be further reduced as suitable with the Christmas and New Year period. I chair the substantive amount of subcommittees as I deem it to be my utmost responsibility so to do as chair of the Licensing Committee. And as you know, if I were to be unwell, that would reduce the number significantly. So I think it's imperative that we have a full slate available. So, and unfortunately, also the Licensing Committee can't just take their Christmas break. We have to be available for these statutory required meetings under law throughout the municipal year. So thus, having considered this matter carefully, and Mr. Jones will also advise with regard to this point, and discussed it with my present Vice Chair, Councillor Kelsey, in order to serve the public fully and to provide the statutory service as required under the Licensing Act 2003 and associated law. It was imperative to appoint a Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee immediately to avoid the identified risk of the democratic process being potentially impaired. And I'll now, Mr. Jones, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. Chair, I think you've covered most of the points there, I'll be honest with you. I think the only thing I would possibly add is that we do have three scheduled, and forgive me if you said that, we have three scheduled subcommittee meetings between now and the special meeting in January. And obviously with the festive period approaching, there is every potential that we could have some TENS applications, which would be required to be called at short notice. I think you covered the other points in terms of the procedure, in terms of the notice that we got yesterday afternoon, and that we served notice of the additional item as soon as practicably possible on members. And you've obviously outlined the reasons for urgency. More than happy to cover any other points if members have any questions, but I think you covered that and the reason for urgency with your statement.
Councillor Kelsey and then Councillor Burton, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I apologise to the board for the short notice of myself resigning? The sole reason for this, well, there are two actual reasons, is one, my personal workload from my personal job has gone skyrocketing through the roof at the moment, but also both of my partner's parents, who happen to live at either end of Wales, are both seriously ill, and we are going backwards and forwards each week to visit them until obviously the day comes when we will no longer need to. And I didn't feel that I could back you up as I have been in the past. I've always been probably the strongest attendee as a substitute on the licensing board. I'm one of the most experienced licensing board members that we've had on this board. But I do apologise for the short notice for that, but there is no other reason apart from reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. And before I go to Councillor Burton, you know, we do owe you very much a debt of that constancy and always being available. And I do very much appreciate it. And the fact that you had to give notice is, as you say, a matter of personal issue. And of course, this committee will accept that. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, or rather a question, you went through the three possible people who can chair a licensing subcommittee meeting, which is the chair, the vice chair, or an experienced member of the committee. So if we elect a new vice chair today, how does that affect the number of people available to chair? So of course, we elect a vice chair who isn't an experienced member of the committee.
Well, as to number, I don't think that the numbers as to how that pans out is the fact that I just need a vice chair in place. As to what the vice chair's positioning, or whoever that vice chair may turn out to be, is not of relevance really to this morning's negotiations. I need a vice chair for the reasons stated, Councillor Burton. So unless Mr Jones can be further useful, I'm afraid I don't really have an answer to that, because I don't see there's a relevance because it's just having a vice chair in place. Mr Jones?
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, from an administrative point of view, we allocate members to the subcommittees. So when we have those schedules and where we've got a chairman and vice chairman in place, then we would allocate and invite those two respective members to every committee or every subcommittee to attend. So that increases the pool, if you like, or the availability of someone to preside over the meeting. Obviously, as chair, you endeavour to attend all of those, but in your absence, it would be already established that the vice chairman would be invited to those meetings. So that increases the resilience of convening those subcommittee meetings.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So if we are content, Councillor Johnson, did you want to speak? No. No. Right. Okay. Okay. So we will then continue to the nominations. If everybody's content, thank you very much, Mr Jones, for attending, and thank you for your advice and support, and for dealing so quickly with this emergency item. A great thanks to you, because you were only advised yesterday and you were able to pull everything together. So we're very grateful to you. Thank you. That said, may I please receive the nominations for the position of the Licensing Committee Vice Chair? You nominate Councillor Johnson. Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please, for Councillor Johnson? Councillor Lawrence Williams. Thank you. And are there any other nominations? Councillor Farquhar?
I would like to nominate, in his absence, without a substitute, Councillor Brown.
Okay. Councillor Brown, do I have a seconder, please?
I'm quite happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have more than one nomination, so we will go to a secret ballot. Thank you. So welcome back. We have taken the secret ballot, and the result is that Councillor Johnson is elected to serve as Vice Chair. So congratulations, Councillor Johnson. Would you come and join me, please? And thank you very much for the nomination for Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown is an experienced member of this committee and would have served extremely well as Vice Chair, and I thank him for his nomination for this morning. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Just allow Councillor Johnson to settle in. So moving on then, members, officers, we move to declarations of interest. Can people indicate, please, if they have any declarations of interest, can they please show? I'm not seeing any, and for completeness, I have no declarations of interest as chairman of this committee. Moving then to confirmation of minutes. We are here to confirm the following sets of minutes as an accurate record. I have signed the previous sets of minutes, which I will pass to the clerk, and I will sign these minutes. Would you want to sign them now, or is it okay with regard to time? Members, I will sign those afterwards, not a problem. And they are the minutes pertaining to the Licensing Committee for the 15th of September 2022, Licensing Subcommittees the 31st of August, the 14th and the 29th of September, the 12th of October and the 9th of November. Just to note that the full exempt versions of the minutes of the subcommittee held on the 14th and 29th of September 2022 are also appended as restricted documents. Item 5 are public issues. We have none to date. And moving on to the substantive electric and hybrid vehicles with regard to taxi and private hire. The reason, as the meeting on 10th of March 2022, the committee considered an update report of the implementation of the new BCP taxi and private hire vehicle policy in relation to electric hybrid vehicles. The committee asked about actions to progress the current lack of provision or incentives to provide these vehicles prior to a full review of the policy in 2025. The committee asked officers to prepare some wording to include in the policy to indicate the council is keen to work with the trade to increase provision of electric and hybrid licensed vehicles. And we have officers attending to support our committee this morning. And we have Nananka Randall. Good morning, Nananka.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning. And Ms. Randall is our interim head of Safer Communities. And we have Trudy Barlow, our licensing officer, should all be online for us. Francesca Powell from the Sustainable Transport team. And of course, we have Linda Cole, our licensing committee legal advisor, to my left. Could I ask you, please, Mrs. Randall, if you would take the committee through the report? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. You stole my film. I'm so
sorry. You can repeat it because I'm sure it didn't sink in. So please do feel free to repeat it.
So in its meeting on the 10th of March, members considered an update to the current BCP taxi and private hire vehicle policy. And in relation to electric hybrid vehicles, the committee asked about actions to progress the current lack of provision or incentives to provide these vehicles prior to a full review in 2025. And by way of that, they asked officers to put forward some wording to be included within the current policy to indicate that the council is keen to work with the trade to increase the provision of electric and hybrid licensed vehicles. So at this time, we have 141 electric hybrid vehicles licensed for BCP, and we have a total fleet of 932. So we have approximately 17% of our licensed fleet are currently electric and hybrid, and that is, we are seeing generally an increase in these type of vehicles and inquiries about these type of vehicles to our team. And I can confirm we've actually just had our first fully electric vehicle licensed as well within the last few weeks, which is positive. So the number of charging sites within the conurbation is increasing, making access to charging points much easier for the taxi trade. And I've put some information in there that was kindly provided by John McVeigh, the Sustainable Transport Policy Manager. So we currently have 12 rapid charging places already, and there's an increased number planned within the new year. And in addition to this, there are commercially provided electric vehicle charging points in supermarkets and other car parks. And I've provided a link within my report so that you can see the location of all of those. So coming back to the policy, I've put together some wording which legal kindly tweaked for me as well. So under section 9 of the vehicle emissions, we've proposed to add a new paragraph at 9.5, which would read, we propose or wish to encourage the take-up use of low emission vehicles whilst discouraging high emission fossil fuel vehicles on our fleet. This may include introducing differing vehicle licensing fees for hybrid electric and ultra low emission vehicles and high emission vehicles. We will seek to examine the feasibility of this by working with the taxi trade and examine options that are available with a view to differentiating the licence fees paid by vehicle type when the policy is fully reviewed in 2025. And we will continue to work with the licensing trade and have ongoing conversations about the best way of doing that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Randall. I just wondered whether you would remind the committee of the work that goes on behind the scenes with your good self and the licensing trade and the general meetings that you hear to ensure that there's good engagement continuing at all times. I think that's important because I think that's one of the vehicles you're using to keep up that dialogue.
Yes, we have quarterly taxi trade meetings where members of the licensing team and taxi trade representatives and then other officials or invited people can come along and provide updates on issues at hand. Trudy Barlow actually has just had one in the last couple of weeks, so maybe Trudy would like to come in just to give you some information about the types of things that are being discussed.
Yes, that would be very helpful. Mrs. Barlow, would you do so, please? You have the floor.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. Yes, we had a meeting on the 30th of November. As my colleague Nanka Randall has said, it is generally attended by trade representatives, and there were approximately 10 representatives at this meeting representing the trade. I mean, obviously we talk about many different things, but one of the most prominent things we're talking about at the moment is the wheelchair accessibility provision and how to A, improve that, and B, ensure communication, to those vehicles that have that capability is easier for users of the service. Obviously the other thing we talked about was, the general problems that taxi drivers have with picking up and people parking in ranks, and obviously day-to-day stuff, the testing of their vehicles, the placement of their vehicles, the nighttime economy, and the last one, we also had a representative from the council's depots testing station who answered any questions they had about the test that each vehicle has to complete annually. The previous one, we had somebody from the parking enforcement team. So we do, obviously try to liaise with all the relevant departments. And
I think that's the case I wanted to get across, I think, to the committee. So we all understand that we come here 4 or 5 times a year to discuss matters on behalf of our drivers, but you're beavering away, engaging directly with our drivers at all stages, which is absolutely key because they need to have that other forum to be able to bring their problems and issues to you so that we can assist in the policy to resolve them. So I'm extremely grateful for that piece of work which is going on behind the scenes. So I hope that was helpful, members. Are there any questions with regard to the report or anything anybody would like to raise? Councillor Burton, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. It's a general question to the officers. Is there any opposition from taxi drivers to convert to electric or hybrid?
you, Nananka.
I don't think opposition per se. Obviously, they have the choice of the type of vehicle that they put on at the moment, and it is a purely fiscal decision that they're making. You know, what is the best deal that they can get? Looking at obviously the running of the vehicle, the initial purchase costs, running insurance and all of that. Also, they're looking at everything when they're making these decisions. And I think although, you know, the cost of fuel is coming down, it is still very high. And you know, the running of electric and hybrids is an economical option, and that does play into the decision making process that the license holders are taking when they're purchasing a new vehicle.
Thank you very much.
Can
Councillor
I
Williams,
just
did you
come
want a
back?
supplementary? Yes, of course.
I've got a hybrid myself, and I would encourage any taxi driver listening today to consider it. It really does save a lot of money.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Burton?
Thank you, Jim. I've got a couple of questions, but
Yes,
just
of course.
start
Yes,
with
yes.
one just for clarity. I think the answer was given actually with that bit. We want to check. Did you say that we have at the moment one fully electric vehicle in the fleet? And
Yes, I only mentioned it because it was very notable that, you know, one of my officers sort of was quite excited about the fact that it's our first fully electric vehicle on the fleet.
and are they more in the pipeline at the moment? I don't know how long the application takes. Have you seen any others coming through?
No, the application's quite a short process. They found a vehicle that they want, and then they approach our officers, who then just check the vehicle is suitable and it meets the policy conditions. We are finding it is increasingly difficult because of all the different makes and models and the types of vehicles. So some are hybrid, some are, and there are issues with the space. The boot capacity can be quite challenging. So some of them have got very little boot capacity because that's where they put their batteries. I mean, this is the height of my knowledge for vehicles. I know it's colour and my cousin's husband does the rest, but I know that, you know, the challenging side of it has been the boot capacity and making sure that the vehicles do meet that standard for us, because obviously, you know, we have to make sure that they're capable of transporting people and their baggage, as it were. But the electric one, certainly the feedback was it had plenty of space. I think it was a Passat, wasn't it, Trudy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
And it had plenty of space, so that was very good.
Councillor Burton, another question or supplementary?
On the same thing, because I've noticed that electric and hybrid vehicles are all sort of grouped together in this document, and I personally see them as quite different entities. Hybrid vehicles, but basically you've got a internal combustion engine, which you're getting better miles out of the gallon or kilometre per litre of fuel. But still, it's only probably mid 40s to 50 in old units miles per gallon. Even if you plug in hybrids, of course, you don't have to plug them in. You could still be relying totally on carbon fuels. Whereas electric vehicles, you have to plug them in, and therefore you have to be in charge of them by electric. And therefore, personally, I'd like to see them separated as two entities in the future. I don't know if that is possible.
Yeah, I think what we have here, I take your point, Councillor Burton. It's good to have that classification, but I think it's to take up the use of low emission vehicles, so lower than just petrol or diesel. But it's a point well made, and we'll certainly consider that as to how we go about dealing with not siloing, so to speak, but having one particular type and another particular type. I think the whole idea is to have a low emission, but we'll listen to what other people have to say on the floor. Thank you very much for your points. Councillor Parkwell?
Thank you, Chair, and if I may just offer up my congratulations to Councillor Johnson, having observed him in the role of Vice Chair elsewhere. I think you've got a very able Vice to support you in the work which is invaluable that you give to the Licensing Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. That's most kind of you, and I'm sure Councillor Johnson would like to say thank you. Yeah. Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Parker.
I've got a question, and I'd like to welcome the fact that the trade is actually very very active in consulting with their drivers and their stakeholders, particularly around the accessibility vehicles, which were mentioned, the communication, etc., and making sure that the availability of those vehicles is available. My question to the trade, and perhaps a speculation, if I may, Chair. But my question initially is, on the way in, on a radio article, I heard about an encouragement to challenge the idling of vehicles, particularly outside schools, etc. My question to the trade representative would be, are there plans to reduce our emissions load, to advise drivers, etc., at ranks to switch off their engines and reduce their emissions in that way? My observations, if I may, is that this paper is very much welcome, particularly following the acceptance of the motion at full council only on Monday there, to reduce our emissions and towards our limits. So it's very welcome to see that trade are working hand in glove with the licensing authority to achieve that. I very much look forward to change the 932 fleet with 141 as a hybrid and 1 electric around quite quickly, because I think that will help the local authority and help our residents to actually hit that target of reducing our emissions by 50%. I realised that the major push was to encourage active travel. However, if we can reduce idling transmissions, I think that will help them immensely, and also hybrid and electric vehicles. So that's my question: is what plans from the trade to stop the idling of vehicles on ranks, etc.
Okay, thank you. I'll refer, if I may, to Mrs. Randall. If you have any thoughts as to any discussions that you may have, or any discussions indeed you could have, and how we could provide for that under law, or provide for it as something which is done as a token of goodwill. I'm not sure how that would quite work, but over to you, Mrs. Randall.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because Hackney ranks, the vehicles are not parked there per se. They're actually waiting for a fare, and the vehicles move on through the rank as soon as the one in front goes, as it were. It's got a fare, they all move up. So, you know, depending on the busyness of the rank, I presume in the evenings it's not worth them turning the engines off, because they're moving quite quickly and moving away, and, you know, sort of in a circular motion. Obviously, some of the quieter ranks where the vehicle may be there stationary for some time is something that we can certainly encourage within the trade, and it's something we could raise it at the next meeting with the trade, and we can put some messaging out to drivers, you know, as a courtesy to others in the area, and do it like that. I don't think formally we would have, and we would be able to take any formal action on the matter, but certainly, you know, we've got a good relationship with our trade cooperatively, and it's certainly messaging that we can send out and share with them in a positive manner.
Thank you very much. We'd also have to be mindful, Councillor Farquhar, that a very, very good idea during most of the year, but in clement weather like today, as you know, our taxi drivers might be a bit chilly, so obviously things like that take consideration. But it's a very good point, well made, and I'm sure that Mrs. Randall will take that back to the trade to be discussed. Thank you for raising it.
If I may, Chair,
Yes.
just as a supplemental to help Ms. Randall, is that I was an early adopter myself of hybrid vehicles, as with Councillor Lawrence here. There is, in most hybrid vehicles, to my understanding, and certainly was in mine, stop-start technology, so the engine is automatically switched off. Maybe there is an avenue for vehicles which would be on the preference of the list for those which are actually fitted with stop-start technology. That means that the battery itself would provide for the heating, which you mentioned, but the engine itself would not be running. And the technology is such that all the driver has to do is press the accelerator and they can move up the rank. So it might only be a fraction, it might only be seconds, but that engine is off for that period of time, which reduces the emission load. Thank you.
Another extremely good idea. I have a friend who tends to drive me around. He has exactly that. We stop for a second and the engine goes off. So sure, Mrs. Randall will take that forward. Thank you very much for those ideas and initiatives. Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of observations. Firstly, thank you, Nananka, for getting this sorted. I know it's been a lot of hard work for everyone in the team to do this, and I'm sure the taxi trade appreciate it. I would be very careful with your wording with regarding the possibility of reducing fees. And my reason for saying that is a vehicle is a vehicle is a vehicle is a vehicle, whether it's electric, or hydrogen or whatever. And it will still take the same time for the team to check that vehicle, to do the checks and everything. And as you know, fees are charged subject to the time allocated by the officers. So I'm not sure that we can be reducing the fees for any differing types of vehicles, because I think we'll be opening ourselves up to a whole loss of money and income for that, therefore creating even more problems for the taxi trade. So you might want to think very, very carefully about that. I know we want to encourage the drivers to have decent vehicles, but I don't think reducing the admin fees is the way to go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you,
It's,
Councillor.
some authorities.
I'll just ask
Oh.
Mrs. Randall to come in. Thank you, Mrs. Randall.
Sorry.
It's okay, don't worry. Please come in.
I was just so excited now. It is an incentive that some authorities do use. They top load, I think, the fees for the vehicles that are more emissioning, so that to offset the fees for vehicles that don't have such emissions. It's not something we've ever done. I think I thought the wording that I used was hedging, that we would look at it and examine the options. Yeah, we will examine the options that are available. And if it's not something that is feasible as we move forward, then it wouldn't be something we would be able to do then. I mean, it's not something we're looking at until 2025. And as you know, different options can become available depending on, you know, if there are any emission zones, there may be grants available that we can tap into instead. So just sort of trying to keep that as an option, because, you know, at the end of the day, if we're trying to encourage it, people kind of want financial benefits to themselves, don't they, in encouraging them to spend more money on a vehicle potentially. But you know, no decision's been made yet, and it's certainly something we would definitely bear in mind, because there is a risk to the authority, as you say, Councillor Kelsey.
Councillor Kelsey?
Yeah, I appreciate that answer totally, and I fully understand where you're coming from. But to me, the incentive would be to buy a vehicle that's going to be less costly for them to run, not just get away with a cheaper licensing fee. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, just to give my thanks to Councillor Farquhar, and as a former Vice Chair himself, those words mean a lot. That congratulations means a lot, so thank you, Councillor Farquhar. My other point was just a question for Mrs. Randall, was regarding the number of electric vehicle charging points that are knocking about. I know it's growing, but obviously they're not solely available to any members of the taxi trade. So I would wonder, have you heard any musings from the taxi trade about what level of saturation, for want of a better word, of electric vehicle charging points would they be comfortable with then raising the numbers of, or looking to incentivise their own fleet to allow for more electric vehicles? Because the last thing they'll want is to incentivise something that will then lead to taxis that have problems actually moving about the place.
I'll be completely honest, we've not had very much feedback on that. You know, that's all I can say, really. I mean, we've got Francesca Powell from the Sustainable Transport team. She can maybe talk about, you know, maybe the spread of where things are planned for in future years for installing the charging points. But the trade certainly haven't raised any issues or concerns or hopes or dreams even of where they would like charging points to be available. And perhaps that's something when we have our next liaison meeting that we can raise with them. You know, are there any preferences that they would like to see points put in that are easily accessible for the trade, which would be useful, wouldn't it?
Yes, I also have to bundle in with that, actually, with you, Councillor Johnson. I agree with that. I also had a question in that area, and perhaps Francesca Powell would kindly advise, because there's going to be a phased implementation of charging points starting summer 2022, which is phase one. So if that's phase one, what are the other phases, and how long are they going to take to implement the electric charging units, and how many of those, if we know, which is Councillor Johnson's point, would be available to the taxi trade? Because as we advise the taxi trade with regard to hopefully using cleaner energy vehicles, hybrids, fully electric, etc., we do need to be able to provide the proper charging points. So just that quid pro quo as we move forward, that everything's in place. So I wondered if Mrs. Powell, whether you'd be able to give us some more information. Thank you.
Yes, I am able to give you more information on that. Right, so sorry, it's quite a lot of information you're asking for. So
I think what we're just I don't want to blind you with that. I think what we're asking for is we've been told about phase 1 in the summer 2022. So just what is phase 1? How many is that going to be? And what other phases are there going to be over the period taking us up to 2025 for the implementation of the electric charging units, if that helps?
Right. So all the charging units that we have plans to install at the moment are available on the website. I can send you the link later if you. Yeah. Yeah, so that's quite a lot of chargers. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many. We do already have we already have 28 connectors that are installed and live and ready to go. So those are available to use currently. They're all in BCP car parks at the moment, so they should be perfectly available to taxi drivers.
So that's useful to know. They're actually public, because there are also some at garages and that, but these are the public ones. That's a really useful number. Does that help, Councillor Johnson?
Yes, Chair, it does. No, my point was slightly more touching on the fact that obviously because they're public, they'll be available to anyone else with an electric car. But it may be a long way off, given we only have one current electric vehicle. But EV points, charging points on taxi ranks would seem to be a sensible step to be taken at some point in the future. Obviously, be expensive and maybe a little bit worthless if that ends up being the only one that we've got. But it certainly seems to me to be a sensible step to be taken.
I know that Mrs. Randall has a particular point about putting electric chargers on taxi ranks. Why don't you share that with us, Mrs. Randall?
Again, taxi ranks, they're not parking spaces. They are where the vehicles are available for hire, as it were, so that the vehicles aren't parked there for any great length of time. So a charging point on a rank would actually disrupt the use of and hiring of the vehicle, so that's not ideal. And of course that only deals with hackney carriages, not private hire vehicles, which don't use ranks. So I think it wouldn't help all of our trade, only a smaller proportion of it.
It would be good to have them near a rank, wouldn't it, if not on them? So I think that's something we could consider. Councillor Filer, thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just before we move on to the question I want to ask, I have to say the whole of Boscombe had a power cut the day before yesterday from 8 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. So I'm always worried about these charging points and a completely electric vehicle, but that's another point. I'd like to go back to the point about financial incentives. And I wonder whether it would be more sensible, rather than giving a discount to people who have electric cars, which is going to become much more prevalent between now and 2025. There's going to be a huge change. If you look back 3 years to now, and then another 3 years, I think we're going to be in a completely different scenario, as particularly with places like London putting in measures that you can't use an old car. I think the whole thing will change rapidly, and there'll be a lot more low emission vehicles. So absolutely take the point of Councillor Kelsey that it would be, I think it would be a disincentive to us to make a discount, but perhaps we could make an extra charge by then on the cars which aren't low emissions, that it would be more a fine for not having one rather than an incentive to have one. Otherwise you might find that you can barely run the department because so many cars would be fitting into that category. Just a quick point.
Thank you, Councillor Filer. Unfortunately, advice from legal advice, although carrot and stick, which one do we use? This would be the stick. We're unable to aid, and it seems to make sense, but we're unable to do that legally. Okay, but thank you so much for raising it. Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. Just first off, following on this bit of information from Councillor Farquhar about idling vehicles. Highway Code Rule 123 says that you must not leave a parked vehicle unattended with the engine running, or leave a vehicle engine running unnecessarily while the vehicle is stationary on a public road. I think that is probably already there, but it just needs enforcing to a certain extent. My thought is we're trying to get a balance here, or we're trying to sort of get the balance for taxis to move more towards low emission vehicles. Leaving it to 2025 to make that, I personally think it's a bit late. If we wait long enough, this will not be a problem, because of course there is a deadline for having all vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, including hybrids, removed from sale from the country. So therefore, all vehicles at that point will be electric. Councillor Pilot, your point about electricity going down will be a problem for everybody then. So what we should be doing is looking for some incentive at the moment to try to help taxi drivers make the decision if they're getting themselves a new vehicle, become a taxi driver or replace a vehicle, to help them make the choice to go hybrid or preferably still electric. Having some sort of discount, temporary discount, because as I said, we won't need it in future, because or some other incentive, and I don't think they've explored any other possible incentives rather than a discount, have we? I totally agree that it needs some work doing on it. This decision cannot be made quickly, and we don't have the information here today to take it much further. But I suggest leaving it to 2025 is probably delaying things too long.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Are there any further comments with regard to this, or contributions? No. One of my questions was with regard to the electric charging points we have. Very kindly given us information with regard to this, and the company was MER, I believe, and you can plug in, and if you're a member you pay 72 pence per kilowatts, and if you're not a member you pay 72 pence per kilowatt, and if you are a member you pay 79. Could I just have it explained to me about this membership and non-membership? And also I believe the providers set the price. There's no negotiation on that. Is that true? Thank you.
I believe that would be an answer for Francesca, because she deals with the sustainable transport infrastructure.
Thank you, Francesca.
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to find correct information.
It was in the explanation. If you go in and you read, it says they can charge a car within 40 minutes and it costs 72 pence per kilowatt. You can pay via the MER app, although there is another provider. And the MER registered car users charge the car at 69 pence. Obviously, an incentive for everybody to register with MER. And the first phase has already been completed and are in the following locations, of which the website then stated.
Yeah, so heard you. I thought you'd said 79 pence for MER users. So yes, the first phase is the basically replacement of the previous network of 12 rapid chargers. And then phase 2 is
I just wondered if you could explain to us, because I know nothing about electric charging. I don't have an electric car, regrettably, but some people pay 72 pence, but registered users pay less. So surely are not all users registered, or can you just rock up and use it? I'm not quite sure how it works.
You can pay charges by contactless card payment. So some people pay via the MER app, and other people pay just by tapping their bank card.
So it's an easy access. There's no difficulty in its accessibility.
Yeah, it should be pretty intuitive for most people to use.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you very much. So going back then, with regard to the wording, Mrs. Randall, I think you've heard the comments from the floor, and I think there's some concern that we don't rush this, we get this right, but actually we move quickly as possible, because we need to get it right as quickly as possible. We need to implement it perhaps a little before our review in 2025. Now, for as I know not, Councillor Burton's correct. No more non-electric or hybrid cars will be available after 2023. That's new ones. So we'll be looking for a huge step change there. Seems a very short period of time between 25 and 30. So I've also heard from members they're concerned about the mentioning fees and how they may be used as a carrot. So looking at the wording, is there any wording that any members would like to change or suggest, or is it something that members might want me to ask a little bit further, and we could add this to our meeting of the 26th of January? We only have one item. We may be able to come back on that. Get Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. I take Councillor Cussie's point about the fees, but I think it should remain in there just to give us that flexibility. Having heard the Nanker's point that it is not a promise to the trade, it is just in there to give us that flexibility and that ability to take a look at it should we need to. I'm happy with the wording as is, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, I think we need to leave in as much as we can at the moment. So I think we need to leave in as much as we can at the moment, so that there's possibilities of that. I think 2025 is the date chosen purely because it's convenient for us, because that the review will be happening. Am I right in saying that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my question is, if we don't go for 2025, if we then an earlier time, how early could we do it? I'm asking officers there because it's officers who will have to do the work on this, of course. So what would be a feasible timescale for doing this if we were to bring it forward for 2025?
Thank you. Mrs. Randall. I mean, if it is 2025, you need to state that within the parameters of the art of the possible.
Well,
if not,
I just think, I mean, I would be interesting to view. Obviously, any major change to the policy is then subject to public consultation again, which costs money and officer time. So, you know, the 2025 was because the whole policy will be reviewed and then it will be subject to consultation at that point. I don't know whether this would require public consultation, the proposed amendment, this amendment, because it was the intention was to put forward our viewpoint and stance and our position with regard to encouraging low emission vehicles. This wasn't, we're going to require any change to our policy now to require people to change how they are licensing their vehicles at this time. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but
it's a movement forward. I'll ask our legal advisor to come in, and then Councillor Kelsey. Thank you.
The policy will have its full review because the timeline of the policy ends in 2025. Work will have to start on reviewing that policy, because the idea of being from that date in 25, I can't remember now, June or April or something.
1st of June.
1st of June. So from the 1st of June, we will have a new policy. Well, I mean, the work will have to start on any tweaks and changes to the policy to go with the new policy. So certainly the work, if you're going to do some major changes, as Mr. Randall has told you, we have to send it out to consultation, and any new policy will go out to consultation anyway. Minor changes between now and 2025 don't need to go out, so we can insert things like that. This is only guidance with setting out your thoughts as a licensing committee. As BCP Council and the licensing authority want to encourage cars to be used as part of the fleet. And I think this paragraph is really just a starter for the team to start work, speaking with the taxi drivers to keep them on side and get their ideas, because I suppose they are the experts with the cars in some ways. And it's just really out there to see what there is available. So I don't think the plan would be to leave all this work to 2025. The idea by 2025 is to know what we can do to encourage and what the council can afford to do to encourage. I mean, that's the decisions have to be made. So the licensing authority's got a budget, the way they work at the moment, you know, decisions might have to be made from other parts of the council that they want to put money into this to reduce, you know. there's quite a lot of work to do, and it's going to have a new authority, new council in May, so I can't imagine it's probably worth doing too much before May. That's the only point I've really got to make.
Thank you. I mean, we do have, we're in train with regard to the policy review, and obviously the policy is reviewed in 2025. We don't suddenly sit down, this time in 2025 and say, right, what are we going to do about it? It's a huge piece of work going on, both by the officers and our good selves, with the draft papers coming and tweaks and changes, etc. And contributions, obviously, from this committee will add greatly into that, as will our taxi trade engagement forums. I'm just going to read this to people to see, first if I read it, and then we can all get an understanding as to what is actually proposed. And then if there are any tweaks or anything that's in it, or anything which people are really do not. Did you want to come back in, Councillor Kersey? I'm so sorry, I forgot you. I'll do it after you come in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Linda stole pretty much everything I was going to say. The policy is there till 2025 when it has to be renewed, but we've always had the ability to amend it as we go through when something has arisen that needs to be amended. And I'm sure that Nananka will, if she has conversations with the trade over the next 6 months or so, and they say we'd really like an incentive and come forward with some practical ideas that we can agree to, I'm sure Nananka will bring it to one of the full board sessions next year. It's a long time now till 2025, and we can implement it as just an amendment to the policy as we go through. We don't have to wait till 2025.
No.
We appreciate the amount of work. I mean, we've already got the fees document coming through in January, so I'm sure the team are working flat out to get that for us in front of us, and to throw this at her now would be, I think, would be wrong. I know Nananka's already, Dogverse takes so much time up in her life, but I think if you do get this through a bit quicker, Nananka, then I'm sure the board will be really appreciative if you could bring it back in as soon as you feasibly and possibly can.
Okay, thank you very much. But this does also sit well with our climate change agenda that we've all signed up to, because it's encouraging. So I will read it through. We propose then, in brackets, wish to encourage the take-up in brackets use of low emission vehicles while discouraging high emission fossil fuel vehicles in our fleet. This may include introducing differing vehicle licensing fees. It says may include introducing different vehicle licensing fees for hybrid electric vehicles and high emission vehicles. We will seek to examine the feasibility of this by working with the taxi trade to examine options that are available with a view to differentiating the licence fees paid by vehicle type when the policy is fully reviewed in 2025. Is everybody happy with the principle, I think, of what's being said here? I think Councillor Kelsey was absolutely right to raise that we're not buying into anything specifically, but it's an encouragement. It sits, as Councillor Burton has raised with us today, very well with our climate change agenda. So if we're so agreed, then the options that we have, 14, are to accept the wording as proposed, to amend the wording, or to not include the wording. So can I propose, please, that we propose, oh yes, we should perhaps do that. We do have two little words. Did we want the word propose or wish, or did we want the word take up or use? You have the wording in front of you. We propose, or we wish, or we propose, wish to encourage the use of. So which would, Councillor Johnson?
Yeah. Thank you, Jenna. I would say propose, because I think it sounds stronger.
Propose sounds stronger. Everybody happy with propose? General's consensus. And to take up, to encourage the take up, or to encourage, it would be the use, wouldn't it? So which would one prefer? Encourage the take up or the use? I think that's semantics, really. It means the same thing, but what would the verbiage you prefer? The verbiage? To take up the use. Let's have all of them. Okay. Are people content with that? Everybody content? Good. So the wording being then, we propose to encourage the take-up of the use of low-emission vehicles, etc. So with that amendment then, members, I propose that we have little a, accept the wording as proposed. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. So could I have show of hands, please, all those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Wording okay? Claire, very much. Okay, so now we move on to the forward plan. which I'll just open up, I hope. Will you have a copy in front of you? I hope it's here somewhere online. The next piece of work is on the 26th of January, which is a special meeting. So, sorry, I'm not terribly tech. So we move then to the electric and hybrid vehicles taxi private hire. That's today. And on the second item, it's 26th January, which is an extra meeting to consider a report outlining proposed fees and charges for issued licenses within the remit of the licensing team as a special meeting. And then on a meeting of the 9th, we have the report of the outcome of discussions with the taxi trade of the 26th. We have that's provision and positioning of taxi ranks, and we have the unmet needs survey, which has come round again. And also on the 9th, we have the wheelchair accessibility vehicles item, which consider amendments to the vehicle policy to address concerns raised relating to the number and availability of licensed wheelchair accessible vehicles. So that's a pretty packed meeting on the 9th.
Sorry, I believe
that's been moved. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Randall. If you'd like to advise us of some changes, thank you.
Yeah, just going back with regard to the fees, just to say the forward plan does say that there's no consultation, but actually for taxi vehicle and operators there is a consultation period for any variations to the fees, so that we'll have to take into account when we have that meeting. It doesn't include drivers' fees or any other fees for that matter. And with regard to the wheelchair accessibility, that's now proposed to go on the May agenda to give us more time to consider, because we will need to have some working party sort of task and finish groups to consider what we can do with regard to that item.
Right, yes, I see your note in the last box there clearly states that. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you.
And then the last is a review of pricing mechanism for licensed vehicles, which will be at our May meeting as well. So members, if we're content with that, is there anything the members would like to, I mean, that takes us up, actually that takes us over the next municipal year. So I think, I imagine that these things will stay on the agenda subject to any changes with regard to makeup of this committee. But is there anything that the members had to take forward? No? Okay, so thank you very much, members. Thank you for your attendance today, and I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you, and we will finish.